Welcome to the Daily Commercial Forum. I'm your host, Sandy Moore. Every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten or assaulted in the United States, and studies show that nearly 10 million children witness a form of domestic violence every year. Today, we will talk about what you can do if you or someone you know find themselves a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence. Our guest from the Haven of Lake and Sumter counties, our Executive Director, Kelly Smallridge, Grants and Contract Manager, Rebecca Teston, and Nikki Rowe, the Human Resource Manager and Legal Advocate. Also joining us is Lieutenant George Whitaker with the Leesburg Police Department. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's start by talking a little bit about the Haven. Kelly, can you tell us, what exactly it is and how it started? Or
We are a victim service organization. We serve victims of domestic violence and sexual assault for Lake and Sumter counties. We also serve Citrus County in the areas of sexual assault.
Okay, and exactly what does that mean?
People who have been victimized in any way, it could have been 20 years ago, maybe when they were a child, maybe it happened yesterday. They are referred to us for counseling services, whatever services that they might need.
Okay, and what about housing? I mean, is that part
Yes.
of it? I mean, what kind of?
We do have a shelter. It's obviously at an undisclosed location since, it is a safety issue. But they can come to our program and stay. The regular emergency shelter program is about 12 weeks long. But, it's hard to start your whole life over in 12 weeks. So we also have a transitional program, and they can literally stay with us for 36 months if they have a plan. Maybe they're going to school. We've graduated several RNs that have been through our program.
So you are really a lifeline to people in distress because of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the types of abuse that there are?
And when you're looking at domestic violence, it's any type of coercion, and it can be physical, it can be sexual, it can be economic. I've seen lots of husbands who, if they do let their wives work, they'll accompany them to their place of employment on Friday when they get paid and give them $20 and take the paycheck. I worked for the department for a while, and I went to a home one time, and I went in the house. This man was controlling how much food and water. There were locks on all the cabinets. The only thing that the mom and the children could have during the day while he was gone to work was water. So control and coercion come in many different forms.
So even if it's not necessarily, because you automatically think of the physical abuse,
right.
But there is really so many other types.
Unfortunately, a lot of people think that if they're not being hit, they're not being abused. And in actuality, they are. Take psychological abuse. It's hard to prove, but we know it happens way more frequently than physical abuse. Sexual abuse, they may say, well, if you loved me, you'd do this for me. Well, if you loved her, you'd never ask her.
And another one that we really have seen a lot of is the stalking, former boyfriends or people that are infatuated, but I'd say boyfriends, but former partners that don't want to see them with somebody else, so they'll stalk them and show up at their jobs or show up at the house or drive by the house to see who's parked in the yard. So we see a lot of that too, as far as on the domestic end of it.
And something that he just said is like when they show up at the job, you have a whole myriad of things that happens then. Is that employer really willing to go through this with that person? A lot of times they lose their jobs.
Because of that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what do you do? I mean, my guess is, especially when you're not dealing with necessarily the obvious physical, you don't have a bruise to show, and you're dealing with these psychological abuses, do you find that people are a lot less likely to come forward? What do they need to do if they're in this kind of situation and they're thinking, well, nobody's going to believe me, or how am I going to prove this? Yeah. What should they do?
And they can come to us. They don't have to necessarily report it to the police. You'll see Georgia's statistics are way different from our statistics because not everybody does report. We know that sexual assault and domestic violence are the two most underreported crimes. So, people come to us all the time. Lots of them don't think they'll be believed. Lots of them don't want to tell what has happened, but we encourage them to continue to do that. I totally believe 99% of them. You always have that 1%, but, people, they are believed when they come to us.
So coming to you, or you can help them, maybe develop a plan, or
we try to do emergency safety plans. We'll tell you the things that you need to set aside if you're planning on leaving. Stash extra money. We'll even hold it for you if you want us to. We will go through the numbers you need to memorize. When someone comes to us, we tell them to destroy all of our information. Don't take that home with you. And we're not going to call your house unless that's a safe number to call. just take as many precautions as you can. We have a little, it's called a lethality assessment. A lot of people will come to us and they'll sit down and say, well, he'd never do that to me. Well, let's go through this assessment. Has he ever done this, 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 this? And then when we get to the end of the assessment, they're like, oh, wow, maybe. You know, people do die who are in these situations, unfortunately.
So maybe, and George, you might be the person to answer this. You know, when someone is arrested for domestic violence, what exactly happens? I mean, with them?
Basically, what they're arrested for is battery, and then it's enhanced to battery with the element of domestic violence. Basically, they're taken to Lake County Jail under no bond. They cannot get out of jail until their first appearance when they see the judge. So after that, a new thing that Lake County Jail has put into place, along with the state attorneys, is a no victim contact rule. It used to be you arrest a subject for a person for domestic violence, and all of a sudden you got the victim showing up at the jail to pick them up when they get out. Or there's no injunction in place once the suspect get out. He could show back up to the victim's home. So with the no victim contact rule, they have to sign saying that. Basically, it's a judge order. They have to sign it saying they are not to be around that the victim, which is basically in essence an injunction that's being put in place right then and there. And until the judge drops it, they can't go back around that to see the victim. So,
now, and you mentioned battery, but what if it is a case of the other? Someone feels like they're being stalked, or someone, or the psychological abuse, or things like that.
The stalking, arrestable offense. As far as the psychological, that's we kind of play that one by ear to see how emotional distress they are. We might refer them to the Haven for for services. But we mainly look for, stalking, sexual assaults, sexual batteries, aggravated assaults, just threatening to beat somebody could be a arrestable offense. So, and the key to that, we have to make sure that they live together or have lived together in the past, and could be boyfriend, girlfriend, and have a child in common. They've never been married, but as long as they have a child in common, it's still considered domestic violence. So we look at all those factors also, and along with physical injuries, and that's determining factor as far as making an arrest, and then we take them on to Lake County Jail.
Now, what if somebody is looking at this and thinking, I feel like they know somebody who maybe is suffering from abuse, or what are some signs that you can look for with abuse?
Number one is controlling behavior. Is the person obsessively jealous? Do they question you, such as an interrogation? Where have you been? Who'd you see? Why'd you talk that long? Bruises on the individual, and she's always making excuses that she's clumsy. Extreme weight loss, lack of sleep. I mean, there's a huge list of things that can identify somebody. And if you do know someone, or you are in that particular situation, please call one of our hotlines. And if we could get more people involved, because people still have a tendency to say, that's their business, it's not mine. Yeah, but what happens if she ends up dead, or he ends up dead? Because it is men, women, and children. Would it not be your business if you could save someone's life?
Well, and we've seen situations where, even like in a coworker situation, where the boyfriend comes to the place of business,
yes,
and it's not just them that gets, that is a victim at that point either. The
and
people that are
true.
around them. So I know that we like to let people have their privacy, but that's not always the best thing. Now, when you're so if you see things like this, give them your information.
Yes.
That's the best thing to do.
Or the police. Please call the police, especially if it's some serious offense.
I just want to add in too, because I do a lot with the teenagers, and they're just as much a victim as an adult would be. With the signs for them, it's easier to notice sometimes, and it can be for an adult too, that loss of eye contact with someone. They don't look a person of the opposite sex in the eye anymore. for the teenagers, they kind of see that a lot more, or in that loss of social activity. They may have at one point really been an active person with their friends, with community, with those types of things. Then all of a sudden they stop.
Change in behavior.
Change in that behavior.
Teenage dating violence is the fastest growing segment of violent crime. That's a scary thought. You had the one case in Orlando where this young man who I think was like 18 and she was about 17 thought she was pregnant. So the right thing to do is douse her with gasoline. And
that was Claremont.
It was Claremont. And kill her. I can't even imagine something like that.
So, I mean, the teenagers experience it too. So I just want to bring that point out that, teenagers can report it as well. The state of Florida is graded a B with the assistance that teenagers can get protective orders without an adult if they've been in the relationship for 6 months. So they can go get an injunction without having to tell their parents.
Oh, okay.
And as far as statute-wise, there is a dating violence statute that was added to the domestic violence regulations. And long as they've been dating for about 6 months, it's considered dating violence. So that's something new that they put in a few years ago because of the dating violence problem. And also something I forgot to add with domestic battery arrest, we if they've ever had a conviction for one conviction for battery, generally first time arrest is a misdemeanor. But if they have one conviction on their record, it elevates it to a felony. So if you have a prior battery conviction on your criminal record, instead of a misdemeanor, it goes to a felony.
So take it very, very serious, obviously. Now, do you, through Lake and Sumter County, do you have a number of people that you've served, or how many people come through there throughout the year?
We serve a lot, and I'm going to defer to Rebecca because she handles all of our numbers.
All right. Hi, Rebecca.
Just numbers off the top of my head. I mean, for entering shelter, last year we provided shelter to over 350 women and children. We do provide shelter to men as well who may be victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. They're not sheltered at our same facility. Other arrangements are made for them. But we do provide those services to the men as well. Hotline calls, individual counseling. I mean, in total, we provided over 15,000 hours of counseling services for all of our services in Lake County and Sumter County alone, and probably close to 10,000 hotline calls. And that's those people that might be calling in on that 24-hour hotline number that, maybe I have a friend who this is going on. Is that abuse? What can I do to help that friend? Or, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm now at a payphone. How do I get to your shelter? So all those numbers are in effect. But, Lake County ourselves have experienced a 12% increase in domestic violence offenses from last year. That's the only county that we serve that saw an increase. Sumter County went down. And that's, like I said, reportable offenses. And as Kelly noticed, that domestic violence and sexual assault are the least reported crimes. And we don't require a victim to report the crime to receive our services. So our numbers tend to be a little bit higher than the reported numbers.
So now, I'm glad you mentioned men, because I think that there's just this, everybody just kind of thinks it's women that are being abused, but there is. What type of abuse do you normally see with men? I mean, is it still physical? Is there still physical?
We do. We see physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and men make up 15% of victims. Obviously, it's generally that they're the abuser, but not always. And George, as a police officer, I had someone who came to me one time. This man is 6'3". She's 4'11". If a police officer shows up at that house, who's going to go to jail?
Right. Right, but it could be very well that he's the one that's being.
He'd never dream of hitting her. She was the abuser.
Right.
A lot of men don't report because of that.
Yes.
They're afraid of, that stigma of the pride issue.
Right.
That I don't want anybody to find out my girlfriend's beating up on me and controlling what I do. And with the teen aspect, it's that texting back and forth constantly. They really don't think that is abuse, but they don't want to report it for that reason.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because you've already mentioned this. You don't have to report it in order to get help from the Haven.
Right.
So that's something that I think is important for a lot of people to know. Okay, so what are the numbers? Like, if somebody's sitting here thinking, I know somebody, or it's me that needs help, where would they call?
They can call our hotline. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's a live person on the other end of the phone. It's 352-753-5800, sorry.
Say it one more time. 352.
753-5800,
Okay.
5800.
Yeah, and something saying that I want to, because I know a lot of times people think of domestic as with traditional relationships, but really it's more alternative relationships too fall under domestic violence. As long as they are living as, a couple, it's regardless of, same sex, whatever, it's still domestic violence. So we do take people to jail for same-sex relationships. So I know, when you think domestic, you think traditional stuff, but we do have, as long as you living together,
Right.
as a couple, they go to jail for domestic.
Now, why do you think that people don't necessarily report it or don't seek for help?
Stigma. Then they, if I've picked this person, I don't want you to say, well, I told you so, or,
Something's wrong with them. They think maybe something's wrong with them for them picking that person.
That's exactly what happens. Or they're just generally embarrassed about it.
They've been convinced it's their fault anyway. That, I'm only doing this to you because you didn't do this. So they, after being told so many times, number one, you're not worth much, you're not going to get any better, you start to believe that. So they've really fully believed that they don't deserve any better. And then, at some point, maybe it does click, hopefully, that they get help.
Right. And I'm sure there's probably, a scared, what are you going to do? You need that person probably. I would think that part of it would be, especially if you're a woman who isn't working or doesn't have a job or hasn't been allowed to even, what am I going to do if I don't have him?
Yes.
Who's going to pay the bills? Are they going to take my kids away? What happens in a situation with the kids? We've talked about that, but what if you have kids, and maybe the kids aren't being abused, but you are? What happens with the kids?
Well, they can obviously come to the shelter with their mothers, and they can partake in all of our services. We have children's programs, counseling, we do activities, what have you. They can also, the important thing is to go to court, because if this is the father, she sends these kids to school, he can go to the school and pick them up.
Right.
So we have Nikki down here, our legal advocate. She will accompany people to court. Injunctions, domestic violence cases such as criminal cases. She'll do DCF cases. We do divorces. Being a legal advocate, she can't give advice, but she can help walk the victim through the process.
And then as far as us, if there is a domestic and children are present and witness it, we are obligated, we have to contact Department of Children and Families, and they have to open up an investigation also to see how long it's been going on. So we are obligated to contact them.
Let's talk a little bit more in detail about some of the services that the Haven provides. I know you mentioned, we've talked about the shelters, but what else?
We offer transportation programs. We'll transport them to try to find a job, to doctor's appointments. We have food and clothing programs. Maybe this lady has not had a job in 10 years. Well, now she needs a resume and she needs some clothes to wear. We take donations from the community. All clients come first. The few things that the clients don't take, we sell in our little thrift shop so that we can, pay for a kid's medication or whatever that might be. We offer counseling programs, outreach, and shelter. What that means is we have that shelter where people are actually residing, but most people who come through our program are really living in the community on their own.
Right.
Might still be with the abuser. They can come to us, they can do group counseling, individual counseling. We respond to all hospitals and police departments 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All those hotlines are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Obviously, we don't close. We have tons of service, parenting classes, and everything is 100% free. No one pays for anything.
And there's not necessarily, they're not going to get a piece of mail at home saying, congratulations for enrolling,
Yeah.
So it's very confidential
Yes,
is what I'm trying to say.
very confidential.
Very confidential. Well, and you just answered my next question. It's free.
It's free.
It's free. I was just going to say how much. So, okay, you've got all these great programs and services and all of this. How is the Haven funded?
We have different areas of funding. We have some state and federal grants, which I'll let her answer because she handles that particular thing. But we also take donations from the community. And it's not just monetary donations that we take. Maybe they cleaned out their closet and they've got clothes they want to get rid of. A lot of places will do cleaning supplies for us this month, or maybe shampoo, personal hygiene products, or baby products. If we didn't have those donations, we would not still be in business. The community really does a lot for us. Now, to answer your grant question, I'm going to let her handle that one.
Well, as she stated, state and federal grants are our largest portion, but we also, any grant that I can find to apply for that we fall under their funding criteria, we do apply for. If we have a current program that's in play, like Verizon Foundation funded our teen dating violence program last year. So any of the small local grants, Lake County grants, and then just private donors that send in their private dollars is how we keep our doors open. And, with all of the funding cuts, obviously everybody's experienced that. Our private community donors have really stepped up to help us keep that level of service at the same rate we've been doing.
And what if they're watching this and they want to be a donor? I mean, how do they call the same number as your?
They can. They could call that hotline number, and the person that answers would give them the regular business line number. But that number, the regular business line, is 352-787-5889. And that building at 2600 South Street, of course, that's open to the public.
Right.
So they can come there. We have a little thrift shop on the property there. So, anybody's welcome if they want a tour or whatever. We're more than happy to sit and visit with them, answer any questions they've got.
And would that be appropriate for somebody who maybe is just wanting to get information for someone, a friend or a family member?
Yes.
Or even, I know we have a lot of snowbirds here. Maybe they know about something that's happening somewhere else, even where they are. Is that a good resource for them?
Yes, it is. And because there is, no matter where they are, there is a service somewhere that they can access. And we are also connected to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So we could probably find out for them, if they're going back north, in what area, who serves that particular area.
And what would you suggest as someone who maybe suspects that they have a friend or a family member or something that is dealing with this? What should they do?
If it was my friend, I would sit and talk to the person and try to get them to leave, or make some arrangement for their safety. Safety is the number one thing that we have to be aware of. And no matter how many times she decides to go back, she's always welcome to come back at our agency. Because women do go back because they've committed to this person and they want to believe, I promise I'm never going to do this again. But we know that it does get worse over time, it accelerates. They are more than welcome to come. I would always try to encourage someone to leave a situation that's violent.
Well, and you say the violent thing, but to me, I'm thinking, well, what if they're saying, well, I'm not, they're not hitting me. They're
That's
not,
true.
what?
Psychological abuse is way more difficult to get over than physical. That bruise is going to heal.
Yeah.
But someone who's told you you're worthless for the last 10 years of your life, a lot of these women don't have the self-esteem to leave.
Right.
Because they believe it.
What I teach the youth when I go is just to ask. That friend just needs to ask, because you may be that one person that finally decides to say, hey, I've noticed this. Are you being abused? And then that person may finally just go, somebody's noticed, I need help. So be that one person and ask, because that may be all it takes for that victim to ask for help.
Yeah, I know. I used to always think, hit me, it's fine. Don't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Don't say anything like that. That stings a lot harder and lasts with us a lot longer too.
Right.
It does.
Like you said. Is there anything else that you just really feel like people should know, whether it's a victim or someone that may be wanting to help? What about help for the abuser itself? I mean, what if someone is in a situation and they know, okay, you know what, I'm an abuser, I don't want to be this, I don't want to do this. Is there help for them?
Yes, there is. Whether it be they've been arrested for domestic violence, or if they come to us voluntarily, we can refer them to different programs. In the state of Florida, we have what's called the 26-week BIP class, which is Batter's Intervention Program. If you have to go through the court process, then chances are you've been sentenced to go to that. If they want to go voluntarily, they can. It's a minimal fee. I'm not exactly sure what the fee is, but there's a couple of different agencies around that will do it. It's a very confrontational class because it's trying to make that person understand what it is they're doing to their partner.
But I'm sure there are people out there that have caught themselves in that situation where they are the abuser or they're the controller and they don't know how to stop that, and probably even maybe want to.
It's a learned behavior, so.
It is a learned behavior. There's a lot of times, not a lot of times, but I've seen a couple of times where some of these women have left these abusive relationships and become the abuser themselves. And so, you know, we have a list, and you asked me the criteria or how do you identify an
Right.
abuser? And we have a list of different things that we'll let them read. And I've seen a number of times where they'll read and they'll say, "Oh, I do that, I do that, I do that," and they didn't realize that they had turned into what they tried to get away from.
Well, I really appreciate your time today and really sharing with us about this, and I'm sure that there's people out there that will be helped because of this. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
you.
for having us.